Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen, and an extremely warm welcome on a cold evening. How are you? All good, all good. Thank you for making the time. We've got three excellent speakers for you tonight, covering a wide variety of different areas of the digital world. One of our speakers literally is coming in the taxi as we speak up from the railway station, so we'll be with us in a second. I'd just like to reflect very quickly to 1979, which was a young man, a long time ago. I remember starting off at college on my course, and there was three things, looking back on that, I got completely and utterly wrong. The first thing that I got absolutely wrong is I remember in a debate with people in the pub, is that I was arguing that beer would never reach 50 pence a pint, because no one would pay that money for it. At the time it was 35 pence a pint, so that was a definite failure. The second one was careers, and at the time my intention was to, I did go into the restaurant business, and I never ever foresaw going into education or ending up being principal of such a fantastic college as this. And the third thing, which is on the course, they brought in a new, I don't think you call them modules in those days, but a new module called information technology. And I remember doing information technology and writing pages of code that I didn't understand to be handed in to turn into batch cards, which was a week or so later, to then handing the batch cards into some people with a massive mainframe that would come back a week or so later to be printed off with that green computer print that told me something I couldn't understand. I remember saying, this will never, ever catch on. So, yet again, proved completely wrong. And when you look back in that, it's relatively short 40 years, and you see where we are tonight, and you see some of the things that, as you know, colleagues here, we've been at the forefront with at the college with artificial intelligence, chatbots, digital assistants, auto marketing. You just think to yourself, wow, how did we get here? And I think it's the back 40 years, the thinking about what wasn't possible, as I saw it at the time, because you can only see the own horizons you've got, is we're now in that point of 1979, now in 2020, and saying, well, obviously this is as far as we've gone, we can't get further. But clearly that's not the case. And I guess that's the question that we're going to be testing a little bit tonight, is what's happening in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And trying to imagine what that might look like, and the impact it's going to have on us from a teaching point of view. So, without further ado, you see I stalled that perfectly till time made it in. Good time. I would like, with very, very great pleasure, to introduce our host and compere for the evening, Professor David Hopkins. Professor David Hopkins.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, my name is David Hopkins. I'm the Professor of Education and Leadership at the University across the road. And it's my privilege once again to chair the second Spotlight Symposium. Those of you who were with us last time will remember that we took our focus on mental health, and I thought we had a brilliant evening. Our speakers were fantastic, and the engagement with the audience was just outstanding. So I think we have to do even better on that this evening. Our focus this evening, our spotlight this evening, is on digital excellence. And it seems to me that this is a very opportune topic. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've learned, or I've learned, that artificial intelligence has actually been able to diagnose cancer far more effectively than a local GP. And I think it was last week, artificial intelligence has actually come up with a new and more powerful form of an antibiotic. So we are at a time of incredible innovation, and I think that these innovations can contribute significantly to our society and our economy and our well-being. So I would want to applaud you and your colleagues, Bill, for focusing on this topic this evening. And I think it's particularly appropriate that we're taking this evening here at the college, because Bolton College, as Bill just has alluded to, is at the forefront of innovation in digital excellence in the FE sector. Here at the college, we have, under the leadership of Aftab, where's Aftab? Under the leadership of Aftab, he's escaped. Under the leadership of Aftab Hussain, we have Ada, which is our campus digital assistant, and we've just introduced First Pass, which is a formative assessment program. And so in the college itself, as I say, is sort of leading the way in this area. We've got three distinguished speakers here this evening. Chris Dixon, that's Chris from Lancaster, Dr. Geet de Mel from IBM via Sri Lanka, and Ty.
Yeah.
See, you're not Welsh, we have to call you T.
I know,
if you're
I'm
Welsh.
Mancunian Welsh.
T is house in Welsh. Lovely to have you here this evening, Ty, and Ty is from the Education Foundation. So, as we did before last time, we'll follow the same. We'll follow the same sort of pattern. I will briefly, you'll be pleased to know, introduce our speaker. They will then have 20 minutes to make their presentation, and I will be fastidious in keeping them to the 20 minutes, and then we'll have a maximum of 10 minutes for questioning before we move on to the next speaker. And we should be finished by 7:30, so it'll be a guess as to whether it'll be hailing or sleeting or raining when we leave the building. So perhaps you want to come back for some more, Bill. You never know. Okay, so without more ado, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Dixon from the University of Lancaster. Chris is Head of IT Partnership and Innovation, which is a catch-all, he told me, for when they didn't really know what he was doing, they called it innovation. So Chris, thank you for coming and for innovating with us. And Chris is going to talk about exploring the strategic drivers behind Lancaster University's Ask LU Campus Challenge. That flows off the tongue, doesn't it?
Excellent. I can't remember whether I came up with that title or whether perhaps Aftab came up with it. So.
Anyway, you're very welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really lovely to be here, and I didn't mention to any of the colleagues that I've met already, but I actually got my Sicilian Guilds in Electronic Engineering at Bolton College, so in some senses I'm a former alumni come good, perhaps. I don't know. No. Here we go. So I come to you having released a campus chatbot. I run an innovation team at Lancaster made up of staff. We've got 3 full-time developers, got a whole bunch of part-time students, and in many ways they did give me the job because no one really knew what innovation meant, and I'm kind of the crazy person that breaks the rules and gets away with things. And I've worked at the university since 2001, so I had a bit of experience doing programming and development. I then ran the help desk for a while, which was extremely interesting and challenging. And then, with a bit of a background as being a developer, I got into the idea of doing innovation. And one of the things about doing innovation is you have to do what we call horizon scanning. So you have to look at the next technology that might be coming along. And really, I always describe innovation as doing things that might go horribly wrong and don't necessarily have a business case. And in fact, that's how we sort of started with voice. But as was introduced, I should be telling you about what the strategic benefit was to the university. So for me, there's one clear reason that we should be doing voice technology, and the reason that we got into it, and that's that we can talk a lot more effectively than we can type. So I don't know, just by show of hands, who has a sort of voice assistant type device, an Amazon Alexa, a Google Home, an Apple HomePod? So that's quite a few, certainly the majority in the room. So you may recall many years ago the horror stories you would have of trying to talk to your device in your car or your Siri interface or your phone. It would never get it right, and it would always, present some weird answer. But actually, the technology's kind of got to the point where it really is able to understand what you want. It's able to interface with things in your house. It can turn the lights on and off. It can do all of this fantastic stuff. Just another few stats. If you're interested in the world of voice stats, you can just Google, voice stats, and it'll give you a whole load. But I've pulled out a few here, which I think were quite key to us. So, this is Gartner stats. 30% of all searches will be done without a screen by 2030. 20. And we could see from our own kind of analysis that students are starting to use their voice more. They're starting to use, they're definitely on their phones a whole lot. The idea of having a kind of big clunky web portal is definitely kind of out of the window. This was an interesting one. This is from Google. 41% of people who own a smart speaker say it feels like they're talking to a friend or another person. And when we started thinking about the idea of a digital friend, we thought that that was a really good thing for students. Sometimes they're in an environment where, you know, they might not have many friends. The idea of having a digital assistant that they can talk to in a similar way that they could talk to their friend at campus was quite appealing, really. Voice search is also coming into all of our devices. So Microsoft has Cortana, which is their search assistant, and they say that 25% of searches conducted through Windows 10 are kind of coming through Cortana. So it's starting to be built into devices. It's in your phone, it's in your desktop computer, it's everywhere. And here's another compelling stat: 55% of teenagers using voice search on a kind of daily basis. And those teenagers are the kind of people that are going to be coming to Lancaster University after they've finish their studies, hopefully. So we thought we'd better be getting on with delivering some chatbot. We also had a look at some really good, these are my favourite examples. So there's a brilliant Alexa skill by Domino's Pizza, and they realised that Domino's know your favourite pizza, they know your credit card number, and the Alexa device knows where you live. The genius was, all you have to say is, Alexa, ask Domino's to bring me my favourite pizza. Ding ding, knock on the door, and there's your pizza delivered. Super simple. Dead cheap for Domino's to deliver, didn't cost them a lot to program, but yet they took 5% of the worldwide market share in pizza delivery after the delivery of that app. So that's a pretty compelling story. And we were looking at that thinking, we better get on board with this. Campbell's Soup is another interesting one that I really like. Their little idea was that quite often you've got a whole cupboard full of ingredients and you want to know what you can make. So their app, you can say, I want to make some soup, and you can tell it the ingredients that you've got and it will suggest a healthy, nutritious soup recipe. Now, of course, it's going to require a kind of Campbell's Soup. So as long as you're stocked up on soup, then you're all right. So we had a whole bunch of, this last example, slightly frivolous perhaps, but this was my niece, who I think was 5 at the time. She had added some interesting items, which you might be able to read on the screen, to her parents' shopping list when they pulled it up on their Alexa device. And that just shows you that even the smallest kind of toddler is able to interact with this technology. So we had loads of compelling examples that we were seeing. It should, in theory, remember it's easier to talk than it is to type, it should be faster and easier. It can save you actual kind of real money, so from a university perspective that's a great kind of business case. We knew that students, even 5-year-old kids, were comfortable with using voice. Loads of compelling statistics, some of which I've shared with you today. And the other thing, because a lot of this technology is delivered in the cloud, because that's the computing power that actually drives your voice technology, it could build the university a kind of foundation for then delivering other cloud services. So we thought this is a really good idea, let's develop a campus voice bot. Well, of course, not quite as simple, you've got to get people to kind of invest in your idea. So one of the things we did is to cut a long story short, we became involved with Amazon. We demonstrated some of the innovation stuff we've been doing, and they said, how about we work with you to turn this into something really, really good. Amazon have a thing called start with the press release. I don't need you to read all this, but you basically start with your press release and then work backwards. So we wrote this really compelling story which went, Lancaster University is first UK campus to launch student digital friend. It knows everything about you and it's super amazing. And that was kind of where we started. We launched our campus chatbot back in March 19, and we've been continuing to build on it. But what was really interesting is that we actually had an in-print article in the Times newspaper, and I did a kind of check on what got written in the article versus what we wrote in our original press release, and it was pretty much the same thing. So I think that's that felt pretty good. So how did we actually do it, and how could you go about doing it too, if I've made the case to you? So our chatbot is called LU, because LU is kind of slang for Lancaster University. fact, one of the most difficult things in the project was coming up with a name for the chatbot. Don't try and name anything in a university. I don't know if it's the same in a college, but the number of meetings we had trying to decide what to call it, absolute nightmare. Anyway, it's called LU, and it's been very successful. So we started back in March 2018. We started off by, as I've hopefully shown you, having some early prototypes, playing around with things. That's how you do innovation. You mess about. Generating some excitement from the university community, showing it to people, getting them interested. We wrote that press release and we went to the university and said, can you give us a little bit of investment? And they said, yeah. Well, after 6 months, they said yeah, and they gave us some money to employ some developers to do it. We've got a team of student developers, which is really great. They're fairly cheap, but they also get really good experience kind of working and developing with us, which is really good. First thing we did, we thought, well, what we're going to build into this chatbot. So we had a simple one survey question to 3,000 students promoted through our mobile app. And we just said, what would you like to ask a chatbot? Open-ended question, and analyse the results, which were interesting. A lot of kind of when's the pub open, when's the shop open, all that kind of stuff, which we themed into something called Campus Life. But also a lot of academic things. So what feedback did I get? What's my grade? Do I need to work harder and push a bit harder to get a 2-1? Those kind of questions. So we themed those together, we clumped them into work areas, and then we went through a series of agile sprints. So if you're not developing software using agile, you definitely should be. It's the way forward. Sure, Aftab does the same. So we had a series of 30-day sprints. So we started off by building the sort of basic infrastructure in the cloud. So spinning up the resources in the cloud, making sure that it was secure. One of the things you need from a chatbot to be really useful is to know who the student is, so they can ask questions like, how am I doing? What's my grade? Where am I going next? Those kind of things. So we built all of that in. And then we started delivering features. So we started off with the easy questions that we knew were popular for students. So things like, where's my next event? When's my next deadline? We also tried to build in a sense of personality. So we had this idea that it could be the student's friend. So we were quite careful that when the chatbot speaks back, it uses sort of friendly language. There was lots of discussions as to how far we could go with that. You know, can we have the chatbot being sarcastic and making jokes? And that didn't go down too well. So there's a fine line there, but we started building greetings. There's a lot of sort of general question answers that students have, but one of the things we try to do is always build on authoritative data so that we didn't have to separately maintain it. So we didn't want to be maintaining a huge database of question and answers, we just wanted students to be able to get the information that we already kind of have. Crikey, not a long 20 minutes, is it? We started building we realised early on that some of the things we were building for students would also be beneficial for staff without hardly any extra coding, so we started to build that in. We linked to loads of information we had on our campus. You can ask the bot about the availability of computer facilities, you can ask it whether your washer or dryer in the laundry is free, you can ask it which books you've got out into the library. Also, we integrated it into our mobile phone app as well as the voice devices, and subsequently we've integrated it into a bunch of endpoints as well. So that was it. A little bit of testing, always a good idea. And after 120 days total development time, we launched the skill, we wrote the press release, we had pictures, and it was hopefully successful. And there it was, Ask LU. Student involvement, absolutely key to what we do. We had over 100 beta users using devices, giving us feedback every time we made a new release. We also had student focus groups. We had representatives from the student union to make sure that students were happy with what we were doing. And we also used student social media platforms both to market the skill, but also as we were building it to kind of gain ideas and things as well. So lots of, the key really for involving students is a multi kind of mode approach, lots of different ways. So I was going to bring a device and I didn't, but I thought we might like to actually try and just ask the skill a couple of questions. So I'm going to fire up the Alexa app on my phone, and hopefully by holding it near my microphone, it may actually work. Open LU.
Welcome back, LU, Brian. I can tell you, for example, about what your next class is, who's teaching it, or how many library computers are free. What would you like to know?
How many computers are free in the library?
Sure, there are 75 computers free. What else can I help you with?
What time is Greg's open on Friday?
Greg's is open on Friday between 7 AM and 5 PM. What else can I help you with?
Can you book me a library group work pod on Friday for 1 hour?
You have a .S100.
Oh.
What can I help you with next?
That's it, thank you. Bye-bye. So just a few examples. It's obviously a live demo, so you can't expect it all to work. It works inside our mobile phone app, which is really great because we have a whole bunch of students using it. 98% plus of students were using the mobile app already. Works on the Alexa smart speaker. We've since embedded it into Microsoft Teams. We've embedded it into our student web portal, and it's now available as of this week as a phone number that you can actually ring up and talk to. So embedded across a whole bunch of different devices. How am I doing for time? Timekeeper man.
2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I'll skip my video. It's really useful for new students. New students told us they wanted information that they were embarrassed to ask about. We thought they'd come to our services, they don't want to do that. Simple things: what college am I in? What's my student ID? What's my email address? Where am I next? It's really, really great for that. For existing students that also know the campus, they wanted different information. What's my average grade? How big is the computer, which you've seen? Even fancy transactions like booking a group work pod. It will collect all the information from you, it will make the booking, it will email you. One of the other groups we wanted to have help for was disabled students, and actually we worked with a girl that was blind, and she talked really powerfully, and we have some videos on this which I can share with you, about how amazing it was to her to have someone authoritatively speak the answer to her, and how that had been quite transformative. But we also built in some skills specifically for students with a disability. So I'll just finish by discussing what we see as the future. So since launch, let's just go back, my slides got a bit messed up. We've integrated since March, recorded and summarised lecturer feedback. So when the student asks for their grade, if the lecturer has recorded some feedback, they'll get the lecturer's voice, and if not, they'll get it read out. We've built it into our lecture playback and recording system, so you can ask to watch your last lecture. If you've got a video device, you get video. You can also search that, so you can say, tell me when my tutor mentioned quantum mechanics, it will zoom you to that bit. We've still got resource to develop it. We're starting to look at using machine learning to be able to suggest things to the students. Perhaps you might want to read this journal, for example. We're looking at some quite tricky examples around welfare. So what if a student is really struggling and they want to say, you know, can you help me with that? Being able to do that in a way that works and perhaps has a human in the loop as well. We're building into a whole bunch of endpoints. That's one of our strategies, to kind of get it as deployed to as many places as possible. We're building in more digital services for staff. The room booking example, staff were like, give us it immediately because it's so horrible to book a room, we just want to use our devices. So we're building it into staff as well, and we're looking to put devices into student rooms. So that's kind of where we're going with it. I think it has been transformative, demonstrated by the fact that the university's come back to us and given us some more money to allow us to expand it further. And if I know you're already developing voice and chat interfaces, so it's a great thing to do, but I would really encourage you to innovate. This wouldn't have started if we hadn't have got a device, spent half a day looking at some code on the web and got a developer to build it, our first kind of very simple skill. It's about innovating, it's about trying stuff. If it fails, that's actually good news because you can move on to the next thing.
Chris, thank you very much. I'm going to ask, when does the pub open? Of course, on Lancaster, it never closes.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Any questions for Chris, please? So
it was going to save you money, has it fulfilled that ambition?
It's a great question. I think it has. I think demonstrating that it has saved money is a lot more difficult. I mentioned that the room booking example. So we've just written a business case for investment in the skill, which will allow us to do room booking through the device and via chat. And in that business case, it talks about the actual pounds that you can save. It's the current process on the web takes. If you're a real room booking ninja, you can probably get it done in a minute and a half, assuming the room's free. It's a nightmare. It's probably a couple of minutes on average. With the device, probably 30 seconds or less. So you can apply a cost saving to that. So I think our initial focus was around student experience. A bit hard to demonstrate if it's saved. It probably has. The next phase, you can definitely apply savings, and the university is very keen to realise those savings, I think.
So,
just a bit, when you're communicating with AXA, is there not a GDPR issue? Because students, I can't be certain that it's the actual student themselves asking the question.
Yeah, another great question. There's two things on that. So when the student first signs up to use the skill, if it's their first time, we send them some information. I was talking to a lady about this before, which in plain English describes to them what they're signing up to, how we use the data, and gives them the opportunity to opt out. They can also change the preferences within our mobile phone app if they don't want certain information to be accessible. The other thing we do is if there's particularly sensitive information, it asks you for a PIN code when you're using your voice. So if I ask the speaker device to read out my average grade or information like that, it will say, can I have your PIN number? And that's exactly as you say, because sometimes, if you're in a student room, you don't want someone else being able to access that information. So that's why we built in that protection.
sure. Just wondering if every student in every university, like every teacher in every university has access to a campus digital system, how things have changed in universal access.
Well, I like to think it will give people more time to focus on things that will be more meaningful for a university. So when I talk to lecturing staff, they want to be doing transactional things really quickly and efficiently and as simply as possible, so that they can focus on the student contact time, so that they can focus on doing teaching. And it's the same kind of thing when we're looking at examples of students planning learning, kind of getting welfare support. You want to make that as easy and simple and effective as possible. So I like to think the landscape would change so teachers can do more teaching and less administrative work and less kind of paperwork and things.
Yeah, how good is it at recognising speech from non-native speakers?
In my practical experience, it's really good. Behind the scenes, when you're asking it a question, it's trying to determine what we call the intent of what you're asking. So I can ask, what's next on my timetable, maybe 20 different ways. It has to be able to kind of work that out. You can sometimes run into issues when you're building the skill, trying to deal with the complexities. But in terms of understanding different accents and different dialects and foreign students and things like that, that level is built into this kind of cloud platform, and it's pretty good. I think some of the stats say 80% plus. It varies across some of the different manufacturers, Google and Amazon, but the actual recognition is getting quite high. And there's a possibility in the future that actually proper multi-language will come in. That's something that we're looking at. So can a native Chinese speaker talk to our skill? There's a few little niggles in there. It's not quite as simple as the marketing might have you believe, but definitely potential there.
So,
the security, what you said, if they put a PIN code in, is that put in on the device, or does the person say it aloud? Because how would that stop someone from hacking into people's...
Yeah, so one good thing at Lancaster is we know 98% of students using the mobile app. The mobile app is on their phone, it's already authenticated. So they can only set the PIN number on their phone device, and they can make preference changes on their phone device. So that's how that's done. That gets round the problem, as you say, of having them to, kind of speak the number into their device.
Any other questions for Chris?
At school level, how do you keep the data up to date? So if Greg's changes his opening times, closing times, how do you get around that?
Oh, good question. I could have paid you for that. The design principle was try not to have Q&A that you have to keep up to date. The Greg's example, we looked around to find if there was a system that said when everything on campus was open. People claimed there was. Upon further investigation, shock, there was no system. So actually we took a week and a half, 2 weeks out of the development schedule. We built a system for our facilities department, a web-based system, and we said, look, if we build you this system and you keep it up to date, we'll do you a deal. Not only will we use it for the voice app, we'll write all of that information back into the campus web pages, so everywhere you see the information is up to date. Is that a deal? And they said, that's a deal. So now we know that we've got a system that's authoritative, and it works for things like outside term times and kind of funny hours. So where possible, the key is to use data that you know is authoritative. There are a few Q&As, because there has to be, but we kind of took a design approach not to have too many of them, for exactly the reason that you say.
Chris, thank you very much indeed.
A pleasure.
Thank you for keeping the time, being so humorous as well. I'd now like to introduce you to Dr. Geet Demel. Geet works for IBM, and he works in their research area. And he's going to talk to us about some of the insights that IBM are developing in the field of artificial intelligence.
I assure you that was something I've done wrote. So, it's great to follow Chris's presentation, because what I'm going to talk to you is much more to do with some of the research issues that we need to address, especially developing some of the capabilities that Chris spoke about. For example, the question that was asked at the back about different people and different accents. Same question being asked in different ways. How can you help machines to understand these kind of problems is exactly what we are looking at. So to start with, let's keep that. So just to give a quick background to myself, all he's trying to say is that I've been working on AI for long time before AI actually became cool, and done enough publication in this sector, just trying to say that I'm geeky and cool, but neither is true. But this is something that will be useful to set some context. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, so 1995, when I was in Aberdeen, for example, if I tried using automated answering machines to do my work, well, those systems could not understand my accent. Whereas Alexa actually is pretty good in about a week's time to figure out my accent, and works perfectly well now. Before I get into the focus of the talk today, I thought I'll give a quick introduction to IBM research in the UK, because we only really been here for about 5 years. After I've told you first time we met that he didn't realize that we just 30 miles down from Bolton. We actually have 2 facilities. None of these pictures are actually, it looks perfect here. I'll show you that. We have 2 facilities. One is in Dasbury in Warrington. That's where we actually do look at a lot to do with core AI techniques, and especially at large scale. We have access to something like 100,000 core machines, and we try to do a lot of number crunching, trying to figure out next generation of voice recognition, formula for shampoos, you name it, we do all of that there. And then up in Hurston, that's our mothership. We do a lot to do with AI at the edge, especially things like voice recognition and knowledge technologies. So I just thought I'll give you a quick recap on digital excellence, because it means different things to different people. These are not just my interpretations. I put a bunch of reference sources, you can have a look at it. But the key is very much if you achieve digital excellence, you need to really think about the right technique. Wasn't me. And the speed and the quality of the platform that you are providing. This is just a quick screen grab from some of the analysis from the Black Friday output. So you can see like desktop, smartphones and tablets. A lot of the traffic for the purchases actually went on mobile, but not all of them followed through. But whereas on desktops, it's only like really 37% of the people really looked at items. But in terms of purchasing, majority of the purchasing came using a desktop. So what it means is that when you are deciding where to invest your money for the digital excellence, and this is key for organizations like ours, you need to think about just not only one platform and just can't rely on one system. You need to think about broadly how these different platforms can help you. The third one is actually trying to think about the continuous improvement. I think Chris already mentioned that because the system they are developing, they just got to keep improving that because otherwise someone else will be there in the first place and they'll have the market share. Speed and quality is an interesting point because latest research shows that if your web page or if your answer takes more than 3 seconds, people just move away from your question 90% of the time. They only give you 3 seconds of attention. So if you can't give their needed answer in 3 seconds, you basically lost your customer. So in this case, like if you look at an education facility, it's your students. If you look at an online marketplace like Amazon or UK, those are your fee-paying customers. They just move away from you. Not only that, you also need to think about the quality of the answer. The times where you sort of give them a whole bunch of options and say that these are your answers, go figure your solution, is fast gone. People really, really want a precise answer now. For example, as you saw in the previous demo, you need a specialist answer for that. The last one is, I think there was a question about security. People do care about end-to-end security, but this is not only in terms of you passing your information to someone, but you also want to make sure that information systems at the back end also secure information. So with all of these things, our premise is that things as it is over here do incremental steps. So most of these things provide you some form of automation. But a combination of these things will potentially provide you some autonomy. So like in the case of Alexa or in any other financial institution, education sector, when you ask a question, if the system can understand what you ask, if the systems can understand your emotional coefficient in that particular situation and provide you the answer, that's really is where we want to be. And in a sense, this is what exactly we do at IBM Research. I did this screen grab this morning. We focus on 4 different areas. This is public information. You can always find that. Trust me, this list keeps getting updated. Every time we have a different strategy, this gets updated. But the core aspects remain the same. We are an organization that looks at core AI techniques, how to make today's systems better for tomorrow, but our tomorrow is really the 10-year horizon. We want to really look at what could be the next best thing in the 10 years' time. We do a lot of we call it future of computing, but things like cloud computing, and the best ways to do that appears under that. And then we do all of these things to transform the industry, whether it's education, finance, life sciences. My team up in Diaspora, we look at life sciences, chemistry, science, engineering, manufacturing, all these sectors. How these techniques can help in those domains. Last but not least, blockchain. There is another point that's getting added right at this moment, which is not added here at the moment. But I just wanted to sort of take a step back when I was coming here to think about some of the core research that we do and how that might help the students' life in an academic organization. So I created this story. The story is such that there is a student who's somewhat concerned about their performance in the exam, pretty anxious to know the implications of that, but they really don't want to talk to anyone about it. And this is a classic situation. And there is a motivation story behind it as well. A colleague of mine lost their son at the third year of the university, partly because of depression, but at the same time, they felt like there is no one to talk to. They didn't want to talk to anyone, but they wanted some system, because youngsters are so used to having this sort of chat ability for everything. They wanted to have some sort of facility that mimic like human behavior. So looking at all of these things, what it in a sense says is that, again, the colors are not really good, but they want to know how they have performed in this particular situation. So this is more like the question answering, but it's not like you ask one question and you get one answer, and you ask another question, you get another answer. They want to have this interaction going back and forth with each other. And then one thing that systems really like currently is how to figure out the emotional coefficient of the students. How are they feeling? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they stressed? None of these are captured by the existing systems. And the third one that I'll talk a little bit more in terms of the research that we do is in terms of what we call end-to-end security. And I'll try to give you a high-level view about all these things. So the first thing that we need to do is trying to understand what people are talking about, in this case students. Chris happened to refer the keyword that I always use, the internet. Whatever I say right at this moment may mean X to me, but it might mean something completely different to someone else. Or we all have different ways of talking in different contexts, but we really are asking for the same thing. So that really is what we're trying to do in these situations. We have a whole bunch of research in this space, but also we have cloud services that have these capabilities. For example, in the case of trying to understand the utterance of the person who makes some form of communication. Say that I come here and I ask, well, have you seen Jonathan from AFTAB? And if AFTAB says to me that, I'm just going to assume here that Jonathan drives a red car. AFTAB says that, oh, the red car is parked in the usual place. Now I know that AFTAB is referring to the fact that Jonathan is a red car. But the computers are really not good at doing that at the moment. And we do a lot of research in that space, trying to use different graph representations of the information out there in the world, trying to link things together so that we can answer those kind of questions. The other one, we actually are working with the Bolton College on it at the moment. We have a research product in which no matter how you say your intent, it can figure out the underlying meaning of it. For example, in Alexa, the way they get the intent right is by analyzing a lot of communication. A couple of years ago, it came to light that even as recent as last year, they have actual humans behind some of these systems, listening and interpreting what people are saying and correlating. Now, this is a concern for some people in terms of privacy and how to make these systems better. A colleague of mine works on a system where no matter how you provide the same piece of information, he can distill that down to one particular representation. And we are working on Bolton College, with Bolton College on a particular project, where we're trying to integrate some of these capabilities so that students can get the answer they're after. After, maybe we should have started with the press release. You missed that. And then we have a couple of other things. So once you know the intent of different people, you have to have a way to represent that so that you can help them to answer their questions in the context that they ask for. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that, and then also systems be much more empathetic. How am I doing that?
You've got 10 minutes.
Cool. So, without going to a lot of details, we have an open source project out of research in the UK. Anyone can download this system. What it allows you to do is to model every piece of information that we extracted in the previous cases into a way a machine can understand it. But not only a machine, if a human reads this is actually a computer language that we have within the research team developed. It is readable. It probably is not, it is not a machine code, but you can read this. This is trying to describe how to describe a student having a cognitive workload, and how to connect different parameters about that student in a computer language. What we can do is to feed this into a machine, and machine will understand exactly the way the human is understanding. So this is one approach we have taken to quickly generate different models about the world out there, so that I can have one worldview about the student's cognitive load. After I might be able to have one other model, or someone else in the audience, they can have a different model. But very easily, you can combine these models so that you can infer things about the student. The second part of the work is that, remember there was a question about like different people says different things, well, same in different ways. Meaning that we have to have a way to interpret the question. We seem to be going under different Sherlock Holmes characters, so we have a system called Hudson. Hudson allows you to ask a natural language query and to translate to a system language like this, so that as a user, I don't really ever have to worry about having to write this structured language information. I can just simply ask a natural language query. And based on this system, we have done multiple different implementations of that. This is Dave, who's my manager. And this is all about a social network, about people working on different projects. This shows how he's connected to different people, his statistics in terms of publications, a timeline in which he has collaborated with different academia, industry and government folks. And this is actually a paper. This paper refers to this particular document. And this is all driven by that underlying language system. I wasn't as brave as Chris in terms of doing a live demo, so I took some screenshots, but we also have a natural language query facility at the bottom. So I can ask questions like, tell me something about David. That will come with this screen. You can ask questions like, has David collaborated with any publications with government and industry folks? And the system can understand it and provide you the right answers. This is another one which we did last year, an event called Moneyball. Think IB, this is our big IB-wide conference. This is very much around baseball. Was happened to be in Las Vegas, and that's what we're going to see. But there are questions that you can ask from this system. For example, it can ask for a question and the system can sort of figure out this is better represented as a graph versus a table versus this is actually happened to be a map because this is asking for the location. So again, these are like different interactive mechanisms that you can have in these kind of systems so that students don't have to really worry about, or any other person using these kind of systems don't really have to worry about asking a specific question. They can express their intent and the system can figure out what is the right answer. Now I want to talk very briefly about the emotional aspect of users of these systems. Sadly, you can't read most of this information, but these are some screen grabs I took from Twitter. The problem is that people do express different emotions, whether it's on a student platform or social media. For example, I say that in this tweet, it basically says something like that: just wait until you have minus $5 in your bank, papers and 2 exams, and haven't slept for 3 days. This is something that a student has expressed, and it might give you an indication about the status of the student at that particular moment. Now, can we use some of this information that people express to help systems to be more vigilant about the emotional state? So instead of just providing just facts, can you temper the answers systems provide with respect to the emotions that people are feeling? We did a piece of work with social media, but this is not limited to social media. There's a lot of work on recognizing facial expressions and translating that to emotions. But none of the systems were doing what we call fine-grained emotions, meaning that the state of the art actually uses only 6 emotions. They are all based on facial expressions, and the problem with that is that it's so difficult to correlate that back to any other emotion that people express. Whereas Plutchik, who's a psychologist, has established 32 varying different emotions and also different ways to combine sort of low-level emotions. For example, here it says ecstasy and admiration, which get translated into something like joy over here. So if you find a couple of different emotions, this provides a natural way to combine them, so that we can say that, okay, based on everything the student is talking about, or the person is asking to the system, they are feeling happy, joy, so the system can start at least providing some useful insights with respect to the emotion. And I think I'm almost running out of time. Therefore, I will just quickly get into this, because I want to touch base on this security aspect of the systems and the research that we do in that. So you can have all the amazing experiences, all the scalable systems. Systems can figure out the emotions of people. But if you figure out that the system is leaking your information to the outside world, no one's really going to use that. Existing systems are pretty good at stopping outside people knowing about the information. But the biggest problem is that for a system to answer your question, it has to know what you're asking about. So in my example of this student feeling quite depressed about their situation, but really wanting to know, like, what are my options, they might not even want the university to know about it at that particular moment, unless of course they reach out. So one system we have developed will allow you to do this whole communication end-to-end encrypted, meaning that even at the back end, when you ask a question and when the system is answering, system answers the question the right way, but it has no idea the answer it provided and how it computed, because there is a black box kind of reasoning mechanism that stops anyone knowing what the thing is asked. So just to give a quick example, this is a classic situation. You have a policeman, there is a suspect called Bob, there is a bank, but for the bank, Bob is very valuable. So if the police asks from the bank and bank says that, well, these are Bob's details and these are his financials, he's not going to be happy. Well, also the customers of this bank is not going to be happy. With this system, query can be asked, give me the Bob's details. Bank has no idea what question it is asking from, but it provides the right answer back. And this has been proven to be one of the top 10 discoveries of the last decade. And the guy who worked on this has the Merit Award from the President's office. And I had a couple of other examples, but I'm going to skip that. and come back to this and say that, so if we had these kind of systems where you can understand how people are feeling and what they are after, but at the same time we can guarantee the total security in terms of the communication, maybe there is a chance these AI systems will get adapted. With that, thank you.
I really like that phrase you had, automation to autonomy. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Some questions for you, please.
I noticed that you were thinking of developing something called blockchain.
Yeah.
And I've heard about it in the past, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on what blockchain is for folks so we can understand it a little bit more.
So blockchain, in a sense, a data store, but this is a data store when you really don't know about your partner in the interaction. So for example, if you go to the bank, they ask you like a bunch of questions, they establish some trust, you ask for a credit card, they'll give you some credit, they see how you do with it, and then they'll increase your credit limit, for example. Whereas blockchain allows two complete strangers to share some information about each other without at all trusting, knowing that there is a system that governs the transactions that they make. So in this particular case, I'm asking some credit. You can be sure that I'm a trustworthy person because all these peers in this room can do some vouching on behalf of me. The way it works is that consider all of us as different dogs. At least 51% of the room agrees that. They have had some experience with me. They tell you that he's okay. And that's how you establish a trust in the most fundamental sense. But then they have all these fancy ways of doing that. One way they do that is by looking at really, really expensive computational tasks. So, I don't know, just say that you have to multiply two large numbers. And you have to spend some money to do that and to say that I'm a trustworthy person. So, as long as someone is willing to do that, I become part of a trustworthy person for you. But you have no experience of me at all whatsoever. So that's the fundamental of the way blockchain works. And then the good thing is that data that we all keep, since everyone, at least like 51% can vouch for the authenticity of myself, I have some form of provenance because next time when David comes to me, he can look at me and go like, I say that he has some provenance. So we again use blockchain kind of facilities to make sure that our provenance information is also stored.
So it's more like transparent work.
Yeah, transparent, yeah. And transparency when you don't have any trust whatsoever about the people that you interact with.
Any question? You mentioned empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy naturally leads us to humanize machines and computers, and we apologize for negotiate. Some people are against that, some people criticize us for that. Is there a danger that we become too empathetic with these machines and computers around us?
I think it's probably the time I say it depends. It's just the fact that if you really want these systems to be showing some autonomous behavior, you want these systems to understand the emotional situation of the people. And if you don't do that, I'm like, one of the biggest problems is that if you ask a very emotional question from a system, and if you just get like a black and white answer, you might, it might actually be the tipping point. So it's important, in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased because I do work on this area, but you find that empathy in a system can actually help in a lot of cases. suicide is one of the key things. And these helplines, my colleague, he actually runs a service now through a charity where adults can chat when they are really feeling depressed. But in those kind of situations, if you don't get any empathy from the system, it probably is not the system to have.
That's right. You know, empathy is at the foundation of the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
Any? Time for one more question, sir, please.
Yeah, I want to ask you about bias. So, bias.
Yeah.
Because one of the things when I read about artificial intelligence and different use cases, the recurring theme is one of the most problematic aspects is the inbuilt bias that's very difficult to diagnose. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we have a ginormous effort within research, it's internal, but it's very much trying to curate data sets. Biggest problem, as you quite rightly said, and there is plenty examples out there. For example, Microsoft released a chatbot that can learn out of social media. Within 3 days, they had to take the service offline because it was just learning all the wrong things, because what is thrown at it, it learns. Also, this good research to say that, for example, in terms of recruitment, historical data, if you put a particular person, a pool of people, it will probably identify a class of folks as a potential candidates. That's because the system is so used to this data. And it has been shown that it discriminates against gender, race, and it's not the fault of the AI systems, it's just the data that you feed into it. So you really, really have to be careful in terms of the data that you provide. You want to make sure that all the bases are covered. And it's okay to have a bit of noise and the biasness, because otherwise it's not going to reflect or cancel out the biases coming from different sectors. But the majority of the data has to be showing the real ground.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd now like to introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, to Ty Goddard from the Education Foundation. Ty has been at the forefront of educational innovation in this country for many decades, and he's going to be sharing with us a series of insights about current and future EdTech.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So yeah, faultless journey from Sheffield over Edale, sweet memories of Edale, and clearly it all goes wrong when I arrive at the travel lodge in Bolton. So I apologise for being slightly late. I'm delighted to be here. I'm really honoured. I'm here really, I think, essentially to probably give you a break from the PowerPoint, a break from talking about chatbots, and Aftab asked me to just take a quick look and a quick tour of the landscape. What's happening policy-wise? Where are we in terms of schools, colleges and universities? Perhaps throw some things out to you. I'd be really interested in some of your reactions to things, and also, very bluntly, to celebrate what I think is some of the most profound work that is going on here at Bolton College. When we first discovered Bolton's work, obviously not Bolton College, I've known it since I was 8, but we felt, and we published a thing called the EdTech 50 in 2018. In fact, it was something like the EdTech 90. We tried to look at the people, the projects and the products that were beginning to shape education technology in this country. It's a massive sector. It's employing lots of people. Investment in UK EdTech businesses are on the up. Investment in innovations, investment in people
is on the increase. The brand of UK education, but the brand of UK EdTech is really, really shining brightly. So I wanted to celebrate Bolton's work and also put to you that there's something very weird and profound in the water in Bolton. Because it is not just this place. We did a, would you believe, we did a camper van tour last September. We literally hired a camper van on the south coast, and within a week we went round the southwest, Wales, over to Northern Ireland, Scotland, the northwest, northeast, and then came back to Birmingham. But one of those stops was Bolton. One of those stops was a school, a primary school, just down the road called Olive Tree Primary. Some of the most fantastic practice, some of the most fantastic teaching and learning that is enabled by EdTech. Also at the grammar school, Boys Division here in Bolton, some of the most fantastic work using education technology to consolidate knowledge, to spark creativity, and to enable children, young people, to be thinking about their learning. Some of those young people to actually learn at home and actually stretch the school day, stretch the learning day, and that's in Bolton. And then there's people like Glenn, who sat on the front row here from an EdTech, Neil Education, connected to Bolton. But also, you look at the northwest and you think about the number of education technology businesses, and I have to say to you, colleagues, it is absolutely profound. You've got treasure in Bolton. You really have. But I put it to you that, and I listen intently to both of our speakers. I think it's fascinating what's happening in the university sector. I think it is, though, uneven. Right across the EdTech landscape, I wrote today, it's bumpy and uneven. Not every college is like Bolton. Not every university is like Lancaster. Not every research institute is thinking about EdTech in the way that we heard IBM are. It's bumpy. Would it surprise you that only in 2019 in England did we have an education technology strategy published by the Department for Education? 2019, colleagues. Go into most of your schools, go into a lot of schools across the country, and frankly, guess what? There is not the infrastructure, there is not the broadband speeds to facilitate what is happening in the world of technology. So on the one hand, yes, we ought to celebrate. Yes, we celebrate the innovation of Aftab and his team, and indeed the leadership here at Bolton College. But frankly, it is uneven across the country. And there was a moment, I think, in time, and I think it was about 2013-14, and you may remember the upheaval, scrapping ICT in schools, introducing the computing curriculum, but also not thinking about the skills that teachers didn't have to teach computing, not thinking about system design, not thinking about training and professional development for teachers to actually teach that computing curriculum. And what happened? A massive, massive downspin, a downturn in the number of girls actually studying computing. It's only just beginning to rise. A massive downturn in general ICT skills for young people. Why is that? After millions that were spent on the computing curriculum, why did thoughtless implementation lead to those kind of outcomes. And that has to shock us. A policy only in 2019, millions spent by the British BCS, the British Computing Society, computers at school, CAS, and frankly, why have we not seen the results as a society? And I'd argue that what you can't do with digital excellence is just pull a lever in Whitehall and hope everything's going to be okay. You've got to think of this system in all its fragility. Yeah, if you haven't got the infrastructure, you haven't got the broadband speeds going into our schools and supporting our schools, then you're going to find something very, very challenging as it goes. But what we found, and I kid you not about what I think is happening in Bolton, and it's very, very typical, is that the innovators are innovating, those educators are educating with the tool that is education technology, in spite of the system. So what they're doing, and often innovators, and you might be one yourself, or you might know one, you might live with one, is that what they do is they hide. Yeah? They hide because they actually want to get on with what they're doing. But what we found, and in our work on the EdTech 50, and we're publishing the EdTech 50 2020 on Thursday, and there may be a mention of an institution close to this one in the EdTech 50 again, but obviously I can't tell anybody about that. I've just tried to argue to AFTAB that maybe the train fare won't be entirely wasted if he comes to the launch at Amazon HQ at 6 o'clock on Thursday, is that we've got to start being really proud about digital excellence. We've got to be really forthright, I think, across the sectors. Yeah? Too often, I think, we've allowed universities, the FE sector, and schools to see themselves as somehow separate silos. We've got to start thinking of ourselves as an EdTech sector. We've got to start thinking of ourselves as profound a sector as the creative industries. We've got to be lobbying. We've got to be talking with government about investment in the boring stuff. Investment for our schools in super fast broadband. You may remember that fantastic quote from President Obama, that it is surely a question worth asking if your coffee shops have faster broadband speeds than your schools. And I think we should be asking that question as well of ourselves. And what I'd like to put to you is that challenges really do remain. And these are some of the challenges I just thought I'd want to share with you in my last 3.5 minutes as David is about to stare at me. Is that, as I said, the infrastructure is in really poor shape out there. We've got the main trunks, we've got the tree, but the actual last few miles to all of those schools have not been properly sorted out. I'd also argue, and I don't know what your experience is as educators, professionals, students, is that professional development, just because you're young and just because you're old, doesn't mean that you necessarily know, and it might sound a bit obvious, but you don't necessarily know how to use technology in your workplace. And also leadership. Leadership is absolutely crucial. And I pay real credit to the leadership of this institution, this group, the Bolton Group, that this innovation is happening here in Bolton College. Because if you haven't got a leadership that gets this, if you haven't got a leadership that understands that digital is about efficiency, it's about productivity, it's about collaboration, it's about not reinventing the wheel, every time, then actually that is a poor show as well. And it's been proven, OU research 2-3 weeks ago, that senior leadership teams that have got themselves digital skills are more efficient, and guess what, that's a surprise, are more efficient, and their institutions are more efficient. And then I'd also put to you about legitimacy. I think time and time again, education technology it has suffered from being conflated, being confused with lots of different things. The loss of childhood, that somehow if we use ed tech in the classroom, we're somehow affecting childhoods, that we're somehow actually putting our children at risk, that this is a digital security issue. But if you get implementation right, right from the start, then your security should be, and cyber security should be absolutely watertight. I also think that some people think that EdTech is just social media with all the risks, the hopes, the opportunities that social media can expose you and young people to. Education technology, the use of tools, software, hardware, all sorts of things, and you know, whether it's in maths, whether it's in creative writing, whether it's in the arts, or whatever, it is, I think, of enormous benefit, an enormous benefit to young people. And my final plea is we've got to find ways of supporting those innovators. And when we publish that next EdTech 50, you won't be surprised. And please look at our website at about 6:30 Thursday if you want to download a copy of the EdTech 50 magazine. You won't be surprised that these innovators are doing what they do, but again, I think they're doing it in spite of the system and not because of the system. And I think that has to change. So what I'd like to see is us to take lessons from Wales. I'd like us to take some lessons from Scotland. I'd like us to take some lessons from Northern Ireland. And that moment of fear that I talked about was about in, as I said, 2013, 2014, a sense that digital learning wasn't just frozen in this country, in England, but was actually in danger of reversing. And I think that is very, very difficult. And if you have a government policy in education that seems conflicted time and time again over knowledge versus skills, then I think we're in fragile territory. If you think that education is just an end in itself for the creation, the understanding of knowledge and not skills as well, then I think it makes EdTech, it makes digital excellence much more difficult to adopt across our system. So it's difficult. We should celebrate. Let's not get carried away. I think we're now on catch-up as a country, but it is worth looking at what Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are doing. And what that is, final point, is they're wrapping around the introduction of EdTech in schools and the introduction of EdTech for young people with all of those really important things, like digital literacy, like digital citizenship, like sharing with young people what digital jobs may look like, what a digital future, what it is to be a citizen. And I have to tell you, and you know this already, you've seen it in politics, you've perhaps experienced it in your own lives, your own relationships, but things, the future isn't what it used to be, as we know. And imagine, and you may have reflected on this yourself in those quieter times, but if you were growing up now, what would you be thinking about the world around you, without a guide, without a teacher, and without an educator to take you through on that journey. So the landscape's good, the landscape's rich. Thank God, thank all our gods, thank whatever God, we've got places like Bolton College. Thankfully, we've got places like Olive Tree Primary just down the road. Thankfully, we've got teachers at the grammar school in Bolton, Boys Division, talking about EdTech and its benefits. And thank God we didn't scratch the camper van when we parked it outside Olive Tree Primary that day. We did crash on the ferry, obviously, but we didn't crash outside Olive Tree. So, thanks for your time. I'd be very interested in some of those challenges that I threw out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you particularly for sort of reminding us, well, not to be needed reminding, but the system does, that education is about the process of emancipation. And emancipation is about developing skills and developing independence in thinking and developing a sense of curiosity. And thank you too for sort of alluding to how sort of EdTech can help us do that. And unless we actually grasp that opportunity, I think we'll continue to sort of squander our resource. And thank you also for reminding us, again, not that we needed it, but about how Bolton College itself is sort of leading the agenda in this area. Ladies and gentlemen, some questions for Simon, please. So,
Or comments, please.
1, 2.
You did touch on connectivity then,
Yeah.
broadband, fibre,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Now, the reason they won't put it in places like Bolton, they won't put proper fibre in, is because there's not that demand. But there is a demand if you thought people like Bolton College, university, the council, they all got together and they would, City Fibre, they actually said that they would put connections in if there was the demand learning. So do you not think they should get together
I do.
and get that demand?
It's a great idea, absolutely. What you've got is the most amazing infrastructure here in the country. I don't know if you've heard of it. Anyone's heard of the Janet network? It is what I would imagine powers this college. It's a kind of FE and university. Imagine a tree. Yeah, so the Janet is like the trunk and the major branches, and it is literally the poster of the Janet network is what you'd imagine. It's incredible, but it's that last bit. Yeah, that's what I tried to describe, that last mile or the last 2 miles. It's that last bit that's
You've got fibre to the circuit,
Yeah.
and then you need fibre to the premises. So they'll put that stuff in, and they'll put that equipment in, and they'll dig the roads, and they'll do the work if there's demand. So everyone should just get together as a town and say, yeah, we do want this.
But you've seen pictures of those villagers in Suffolk or wherever digging their own ditch to get.
And the government are now only taking people who are out of who are in the rural area. The fibre government scheme is stopped now for people in Bolton.
Sarah.
I agree with you.
I just wanted to ask, in comparison to the UK, which other countries do you think have got the best EdTech model that we should follow?
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
If you think we're not quite getting it right,
England.
Yeah. Which countries are? I just wondered, were there any particular countries that you think have a great model in terms of getting their EdTech out through education, schools,
I was really honest. I mean, I was quite depressed in 2013-14. I genuinely thought that's a great sound. The cavalry's on its way. I was really depressed in 2013-14. I thought the cause, let's call it the cause of digital learning. Do we all accept broadly in this room that technology can support learning? I think broadly you probably wouldn't be here at a digital excellence event. Do we broadly think that technology can support teachers? I am answering your question, I promise. Can it change learning?
Yes.
Yeah. So knowledge is good. to answer David, but also there is something about using that knowledge in amazing ways, learning new skills. Can also technology take you to new places in terms of creativity and the arts? I think broadly, we'd agree. And so what I witnessed in England, I think at that time in terms of the government, you had a revolving door at the Department for Education. Yeah, that didn't help. You had a real focus on this knowledge and only knowledge kind of mantra time and time again, and you heard it in terms of a traditional curriculum. But knowledge is great. Yeah, no one's saying that knowledge is not great. Yeah, no one is not saying that Shakespeare is great, but other people may have written other plays since Shakespeare, I think. So what we were trying to articulate was that actually EdTech could help with a number of the challenges that the profession and education in Britain was facing. And where would I look? I would look to places like Wales and I would look to places like Scotland. I would look to places like Wales. So, sometimes people say, oh, let's all copy Finland. Or if you're a techie, let's copy Singapore. But actually, you don't need to go far to see a country. Don't forget they're independent in terms of education. So independent approaches, independent policies, independent tone. Yeah? And so Wales and Scotland are trying to basically use technology throughout the curriculum. They're also, I think, have a independent standards watchdog, the equivalent of our Ofsted, that are more interested in the potential of education technology. I could not say to you that Ofsted seem at this moment in time to be very interested in what technology could do for teaching and learning. There's also another reason why I would say that Wales and Scotland, two other reasons are interesting, is that they've both got national platforms of resources for teachers, videos, lesson plans, insights into products that teachers may want to use on a national website, on a national platform. We don't have that. It's called a Hub, HWB, Hub in Wales, and it's called Glow in Scotland. A national platform with stuff on it tried and tested by teachers. It seems so obvious that we don't have one. And then final point I think about Wales and Scotland is that it's educator-led. None of this is going to work if it's led by the techies, he says. Just by the techies. It has to be led and it has to be directed, and it has to be totally, I would say, at the service of education and educators and learners.
And it's got to be embedded within a narrative and a vision of what education is. My own view is we've lost that over the last 10 years or so. Would you agree with me that perhaps we were further ahead 15 years ago in the early 2000s than we are now?
In terms of tech?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were. I think we're now playing very rapid catch-up. So the EdTech strategy, so why I've got cause for optimism, the EdTech strategy introduced last April has got some really interesting things. One of them is to create a national network in England of demonstrator schools and colleges. This will be 22 institutions acting like a lighthouse, like a beacon, to help schools in their near communities actually go on that EdTech journey. Second thing that I think you'll find of interest is that there are going to be test beds so that institutions that have not used technology can be twinned up with technology providers to literally test bed to use technology. And then thirdly, big challenges around the latest big challenge is what can EdTech do for teacher workload? So for instance, it's run by Nesta, this one, and it's a competition for the EdTech sector to respond to how they can support lightening teacher workload. And if you think of all the things that are out there, I think you can save hours for teachers in terms of, someone talked to me yesterday about, do you know how many pieces of work our school produces every 2 weeks? And I said, I haven't a clue. 60,000 pieces of work every 2 weeks. Now, I don't know the size of that school, I don't know how much homework that is, sounds like a lot. But actually, if you think about Bolton, think about this institution, think about that department, imagine how many pieces of work. So that's why it's interesting where you're going next in terms of your thinking here in Bolton, about how do you process all that stuff? How do you just deal with the volume of all that stuff? How can a human being do all that? So that's why that, where that goes, AI, where that machine learning goes, again, mediated by human beings, is absolutely fascinating. I think.
Steve, thank you very much indeed.
Actually, I have a question for Guy.
That's not what we do on the panel.
You can discuss it in the pub later if you like.
No, it's just the fact that the thing that resonates in my head is this thing that you spoke about unevenness in the technology for education. And I understand that it's important that we invest money in infrastructure growth and all of that. But isn't it the case that you, like, we may have invested more money on like people in terms of like changing the mindset? Because we can do all the infrastructure thing, but if you don't have, as you already said, like the leadership or the people with the identity, it might not. So do you have like any?
Could you rephrase the question again? I don't think everyone heard.
The question is, it's okay to talk about infrastructure, etc., spend on infrastructure, but isn't this all about people? Yeah. And the key investment should be about, I guess, professional development, about leadership teams getting savvy. That was the question. And I'm just extending the question while I try and formulate the answer in my own mind. Look, I think you need both. I think all of this is nothing if your laptop, if your device, if your phone doesn't work, or that teacher gets a load of stuff out in the classroom and it doesn't work because of the lack of infrastructure. I think you've got to start at infrastructure. Part of that human infrastructure has to be, there are no modules on EdTech in initial teacher training that we can find. There's nothing profound in all of the ITT, in all of the teacher training courses, nothing profound. There are little bits, but they're not much on how to teach supported by tech. That's pretty staggering. And then also, sorry.
I'd be happy to provide you with people to research that.
That's a great idea. Thank you very much. No, but also how often we all need kind of bite-sized, continual nudging. So I look at places like Basingstoke College of Technology. They've got a 4-person team that advises people like Bill and David and others on what to do about technology. They work with, literally mentor the teachers in Basingstoke about how to use online, how to think digitally, how to think that digital can support them. And it's the same in primary and secondary schools. Digital leaders, where a leader, head teacher, decides just to actually at times give over the CPD to the younger people, that can have a profound change as well. So I think you've got to do both.
Within the college here, we have a series of digital champions. One for each section. Our CPD is aimed directly out all new technology that's coming out, all new software that's released. Our job is to disseminate that into our things. One of the issues I do find is that we do get hit with a whole variety of stuff that seems to be okay for one thing, but not for another. The two platforms don't integrate particularly well. And then obviously, the key thing is to actually get some of our already time-starved staff to actually buy in to this concept. So if you look at it, I think there's three challenges. One is, like I say, to put more money into the hardware in the system, to get more free time for staff for CPD, and thirdly, to decide maybe on one particular platform and get somebody to make that platform functional for each department.
If I could just make a comment on that, I think you're absolutely right. Catch me back to the 80s where the mantra that we were pumping out was high tech, high touch. But you've got to have both sides. You've got to have the legal side of the infrastructure. I will just make a comment here. Many colleagues here will have heard this from me before. I don't want to get political about that. But our sector, the FE sector, has now been significantly underfunded for the last decade. And certainly from where I sit, I'm listening to colleagues on the one hand, in the morning after telling you about the success of the funding that we managed to bring through very much hard work from those teams to drive forward this agenda we've got. And then the afternoon, I've got staff telling me we can't get new laptops because we haven't got funding for that. So it's a very strange world we live in, and I would never want to put management's responsibility. We don't have the resources, but there's no doubt in the underfunded sector to make the reality that we have the capability to do here. There is a resource issue, and we need to get that in. We need the listening, and I think you said it, Tara. We need to listen to the educators as opposed to the politicians.
Well, thank you, Bill. I think on that note, I think you'll draw the symposium to a close. Bill, I'm going to spend the next hour and a half driving home trying to work out what high-tech and high-touch actually means, or what the implications of that are.
That's the lecture of 1992. It's a good catchphrase.
But before I, you can tell the largesse of Bolton College because
this is turning to a stereotype.
At the last session, they gave the speakers homemade chocolates, right? And they had 4 left over. So these are only 3 months old. But before I present you with your handmade chocolate, don't get too excited because there aren't too many in there.
It's hot chocolate, it's a very big chocolate.
I'd like to thank all 3 of you for such an engaging and entertaining evening. You've all been insightful, challenging, but above all, humane. So thank you very much indeed. Don't eat them all at once.
Don't squabble over them.
Who's the 4th for?
Yeah.
For my dog, yes. Finally, if I may, ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, I would like to really sincerely thank the college for sponsoring this event. I found it, for me, not knowing nothing about this, I found it really insightful and really helpful. But the session we had before Christmas on mental health, really important. And I think I would encourage you to continue to sort of work in this way. So for the college, ladies and gentlemen, as well.
One last thing. David has done yet again a sterling job for us. We're extremely lucky to have within the university group someone of David's calibre with his huge experience in the whole field of education, and indeed advising at prime ministerial level, certainly back to one government back in the day. David, thank you ever so much for your time. Echo, your wonderful greyhound is in my office, and I very much hope that he's held on to his not going out.
Yes.
He's destroyed your strategic plan. He's eaten it. One last thing, again, everyone here knows we have got the best tech people in the country, and a lot of them, they just sit in the room like up there, and it's Ed Brown, whoever your teams have to. But thanks for all the support with that. One very, very last thing, Joe Gibbon and the catering teams, again, the food was fantastic. So thanks everyone for coming.